There we go. So, there are a whole lot of people who are responsible for the existence of this organization. And besides everybody who's been on the board at various times or another, who were on the steering committee when we were founded, really our fairy godmother is Michele Mclellan, who brought us all together to begin with just out of some curiosity about what the hell it was we were all up to. And she stuck us in a room, and basically we realized that we all needed to start working together and sharing information. And because of what she did with Block by Block over those 3 years, and then continuing on with keeping tabs on what we're all doing, I don't think, without that, this certainly would not have happened in the way that it came together. So thank you so much for that. And it's, thanks. And, she still keeps tabs on not just what the Lion segment of local news is doing, but really a much, an even wider swath of what people are out there doing. And she's going to talk a little bit about that.
Thanks, Dylan. Maybe I'll use this one. So it's really terrific to be here today and to see so many people I don't know. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it just says so much about the progress that I feel like I'm seeing. I'm thinking back to 5 years ago at the first Block by Block. People were asking, do I really need to sell advertising? I mean, that was kind of where the field was. And so you folks, I think, have really come along. And I hope that those of you who are relatively new can really benefit from the really hard work that some of the folks have done who've been around for a little longer. One of the things that I've been doing for the last 6 years is I created, 6 years ago, I was a fellow at the Reynolds Journalism Institute. And that's when I first started looking at hyperlocal startups. And at the time, again, just to go back in time a little bit, the narrative at the time, or one of the dominant narratives at the time, was you were either a legitimate media organization, like a newspaper, and this is 2009 when things are really going very far south in the newspaper business. So you were either a legitimate news organization, or you were an angry blogger at home, typing furiously away in your PJs, right? I mean, that was it, and there was sort of no in between. And I got interested. My background's journalism, and I got interested because I was starting to see that there actually was something in between, and it was these small startups. A lot of them at that time, nonprofit startups, Voice of San Diego, MinPost, like that. So I got very interested in seeing what was going on out there. And my premise was, okay, even if 90% of it isn't any good, I'm going to go look for the 10%. And so that's how I got started on what has become, for lack of a better name, we never could think of a very good name, Michelle's List, which is now a database with a variety of filtering mechanisms that is attempting to kind of chronicle and keep an inventory of sites like yours. Many of you are on the list. If you're not on the list and you think you should be, give me your card. There's also a suggest button on there. You can suggest yourself or you can suggest someone else. Two purposes with the database. One, as I said, has just been to kind of make sure that, to try to tell an accurate story. And at this point, I mean, like Neiman Lab and Street Fight use the database. They mine it for stories from time to time. As many of you know, I do an annual survey. I'm going to talk about that today. And try to get a sense of where you are, especially, I focus a lot on revenue. My list, I'm not aiming with the list to have every site there is. I have criteria. So if a site is not aggressively working on revenue, it's not going to get on the list. If it's not transparent, it's not going to get on the list. If it's not doing something that looks like journalism, it's not going to get on the list. So it's about 300 sites on there out of probably we've looked at 5,000. So there's a lot more out there in the news world that's good, but I wanted to focus on the ones that are working on revenue. So if you weren't aware of that, please take a look at it. It's in addition to Lion, I think it's a place where you can connect with other publishers. And part of the reason we put filters on it was so that you can kind of drill down and see if people have like models, or they're about where you are on revenue, or if they're where you'd like to be on revenue, and you could take a look at them. I'm also going to talk today about a couple of studies I've done, and I tweeted out links to those if you want to go in for more detail, because I'm going to blow through pretty quickly. The annual survey, and my pitch will be, and a lot of you do this, you get an email from me in February, if you're on that list, and asking you to fill out the survey. And it's at this point the only one being done out there every year, so I really hope that you will fill it out. Enough of a pitch. But from the 2015 survey, some good news. Revenue gains. 70% said that they'd increase their sites, said they'd increase their revenue over 2014. And by the way, this is mostly for-profit sites, although there are nonprofits in there too. I think it's about 12 or 15% maybe are the nonprofits. So it's very much on the commercial side. The Knight Foundation spends a lot of time looking at the nonprofits. In fact, I've done some studies for them on that side, so I tend to focus a little more on the for-profits for that reason. 17% said they doubled their revenue, which is a pretty good number, although some of those had really small revenue, so it isn't that great a news. But I think the other side of it is, despite the revenue increases, is the revenue is still really small. More than half are at 50,000 or less. And frankly, I would say about a third of those are at 10,000 or less within there. So it's small. A little bit more, the 13% go up to 100,000. But so that's 2/3 are kind of, I would appreciate your feedback, but I think of 50 to 100,000, and I get a little worried, especially if a site is stuck there as opposed to just starting out. I'm asking myself, and I'm not a business person, but I'm asking myself, is that going to turn out to be a viable business? Because you really are small businesses as far as I'm concerned.
Well, in that, you do include in the list a lot of sites that are very part-time ventures. They're not all completely, somebody's full-time business attention.
Well, exactly.
And that tends to change the curve quite a bit.
No, exactly, and I don't differentiate on that. But I would go back and say they are, you can tell from their sites that they're actively trying to make money. Yeah. So.
It's not just somebody blogging away because they want to. It's somebody who is trying to do at least a little bit of revenue. That's one of your requirements, right?
Yeah. The other thing I would say about that 50,000 number is there were a lot of new sites, not brand new, because I usually wait at least 6 months to add a site, but there are a lot of relatively new sites on there. So if they're in their first year or two, 50,000 isn't such a bad number to be at. But I still, I still see the need there to push it up. I really focus, the ones that are 500,000 or more are sort of special in some way. They're probably not replicable in a great sense. They might have investment. They might be in very unique niches or markets. So I really look at the ones between 100 and 500 and try to sort of figure out what it is they're doing that others could replicate. And a lot of those were among the ones that were showing some revenue growth. So one of the things I did this last year was a study of ad sales practices for the Tau Night Center and at CUNY. And we didn't look at everybody on Michelle's list for that, but we focused on 22 sites, all of which were fairly involved in selling advertising, even if it wasn't their primary source. And what we found there was sort of obvious, but sort of startlingly obvious, was the sites that did something to improve their sales operation saw revenue increases, significant revenue increases. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that they did. The sites where the journalist was trying to do sales and editorial were pretty flat. they were basically, not all, I don't want to say, but they were basically doing passive sales because the story was always coming first. How many of you, this is a little bit different question from what they asked in the last session, how many of you are a journalist running your site and doing both editorial and sales? Okay, well, good luck. I think that's going to work for some of you. You know, it's very individual to the person in the market. But what we saw was, you know, that it didn't work out too well. The ones that really weren't working, and I don't think a lot of you are in this situation, were ones that were using CPM rates. That just was not workable at all because those rates, as you know, are just dropping. So the biggest thing that the more successful sites were doing were bringing on a professional salesperson. Bringing on somebody who had ad sales experience to sell advertising. And I know that is a lot easier to say than to do. I feel that way about a lot of the stuff I tell you guys. But a good number of the sites found a way to bring someone on. They found it was very competitive to find someone. They found that you know, more stable or more proven organizations had an advantage in hiring ad salespeople. They typically look to their readership to find a person, somebody who already knew the site and liked the site. The more successful ones tended to have a full-time sales rep, which again can be very difficult, but part-time didn't always work out very well. I think a number of you have talked to me about the experience of a part-timer whose heart isn't really in it. So getting to a point of being able to bring someone on full-time to sell, you know, may not be within your reach right away, but I would strongly urge that you get yourself on a path in that direction as you think about your business planning and your revenue model, because we just saw it over and over again where it was pivotal. I loved hearing Wendy talking this morning because one of the sites in the study is Berkeley side. And I interviewed Lance Noble, who's one of the co-founders, and you know, he said that was like you know, they've been steadily building their business, and he pointed to that hire as a really critical step in the progress that they're making. That it, you know, and over and over again we heard that. Now the other thing that I heard a lot of was the salesperson has to be really embedded in the community, really local, really know everybody. That brings that credibility, some of that credibility that like Scott was talking about. Anybody want to jump in here who's had experience hiring and add some comments from the field? Kelly, you've done quite a bit of that. And
Sure. I think our ideal salesperson has changed over time. First two people we hired, I hired two at the same time. They're straight commission, independent contractors. They definitely wanted to be part-time. And as we grew, that wasn't working anymore. And one of those gave in and started working full-time, and the other one left. And then we hired two more, and we're breaking sales records, doubling revenue, and we started the next site. And then again, it was not enough to have some part-timers in there. And we decided, because the accountability wasn't there, we had to roll into being in an employee situation. So because there were too many employees involved at this point, too many reporters and editors that needed to be paid for them to work when they wanted to. And so we lost two salespeople then because they didn't want to be employees. They wanted to do what they wanted to do. And so from that point on, you know, they're employees and they have to meet their revenue goals or they're gone. I mean, their sales goals, excuse me, or they're gone. And, you know, I'm very blessed with who I have right now, but, you know, we've had turnover, and that has been the hardest part for me.
is there kind of an expectation that people are just going to cycle through?
I hate it. I do. It takes so much time. It's one of the most expensive things about owning a business is turnover. Whether it's a reporter, an editor, a salesperson, your office manager, all of it costs you time because not only do you have to step in and fulfill that role while the turnover is going, who else trains them besides you? You have to train them. You're the business owner. You're the CEO. You're everything. You clean the toilets. You train the salespeople. I mean, it's one of the most expensive things I think that happens to a small business owner is turnover.
I wished I had started my business with an ad salesperson as a partner. I think that would have made a huge difference, and if I had to do it over, I would do that. Up until 2013, we had a couple of part-timers. One was a woman coming back into the workforce after having had kids. Another one was a woman who needed some extra revenue coming into her house. And we actually had a meeting with them and said, okay, we've got this plan to grow a little bit. We need more out of you guys. And they looked at me and they said, we're not it. You need to get somebody full-time. And I said, no, you guys are doing a good job. No, you need to hire somebody else. And they went away, and we ended up hiring our first full-time ad salesperson, salary plus commission, and our sales went up 60% in 2014. So,
It's very tough. Obviously, you know, if you're a bootstrap and especially just starting out, you're scratching your head. Well, where would the money come from? And that is something. Part of it is finding the person, David. I know you had trouble actually finding someone who wanted to go full time. The compensation we saw in the study was typically salary and commission. And the salary, the rate of the salary, or the proportion that was salary varied greatly, but it went up as high as, I think one was 100% salary, because I think that was that Berkeley side? They felt like they wanted that person to be a real part of the, you know, of the team, of the leadership management team. Some of the other ones are, you know, 30% salary and then 10 to 20% commission, like that. But, you know, finding a mix, I think, is really important. There's one small site in the study, Uptown Messenger in New Orleans, who is not at the point, I think his revenue is maybe a little under 100,000 or a little over 100,000. He's not at the point where he's got money for a lot of money for his salary. So what he did, he has a full-time sales rep who is a guy who had been selling as a student for the student publication. And he brought him in, and he has his weekly, monthly sales goals, and he gets 30%, he gets no salary, but he gets 30% commission on sales up to the goal, and then he gets 70% commission. And what that all adds up to in every case where they're full-time is they're actually making a living wage. And that's really the target. You know, get creative under that umbrella, but figure out a way to make them in, you know, so that you are their priority. Selling your site is their priority. And, you know, 70% commission. I mean, that's a real hit on the revenue that you can put in your pocket, but you know, as the sales grow, you can see about adjustments. You can move over to more of a salary thing. That was just really critical. The report I did on ad sales, I tweeted out the link to that. There are a lot of, you know, other tips in there from the publishers, but that was the big takeaway. And professionalize, get a rate. The other one I better mention is. Get a rate structure going that's going to actually keep you in the black, as opposed to just negotiating with every advertiser or thinking, oh, this sounds like a good idea. Oh, you know, $150 a month sounds like a good idea for, you know, this contract. When, you know, if you sat down and did the math on how many ads you hope to sell, you'd just have to say, I've got to get 200. And maybe I've got to get 200 here and create a lesser product for the, you know, the advertisers who aren't going to go there. But that was another really essential piece. There are a lot of examples with the report, links to rate cards and that kind of thing, and talks a little bit more about the rate structures and the rates. How many of you are doing monthly or longer term contracts with your advertising? Okay. How many are doing CPM? it's cost per million or 1,000 impressions. I always get the M confused. Yeah, that was another thing, is that they were all, the ones that were seeing revenue growth and stabilizing, monthly contracts, try to get them to sign for 3 to 6 months, premium rates. You are not selling impression. I mean, you don't have the scale of audience to sell impressions. There may be exceptions to that, but generally, so it's, you're selling something, I think, a little bit different. It's partly, it's, in a lot of cases, the people in the study were selling, they were selling advertising. It was promotional, but it was also, the advertisers wanted that association because the site was seen as a community asset. I think, sort of what the Lowdown was talking about with your crowdfunding campaign, that idea of, well, you're doing good for our community, so yeah, I'll buy an ad to support you, or I'll whatever. So that was kind of the deal on ad sales. The other thing I want to talk about from the survey is, and I'm kind of a broken record on this, I was glad to hear Eleanor bring it up, the dependence on advertising, and particularly on banner display advertising in this sector, is scary. And I feel like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, because on one hand, I'm telling you, get out there and sell it. But on the other hand, I'm also saying, start figuring out what else you can do. And it's another case where I know it's easier for me to say that than for you to do it. But, that's a vulnerable. Being dependent on one particular source, whatever the source, is a vulnerability. Because if that source goes south, then what else have you got? But, banner display advertising is just under assault, either in reality or in perception. It doesn't really matter whether ad blockers work or not. The fact that everybody's downloading an ad blocker tells you that they hate traditional advertising. And advertisers, I can't believe advertisers haven't figured this out yet. I don't use ad blockers because I'm a journalist, and I think you have to pay for it some way. But I don't frequent sites that have intrusive ads. And I don't buy from advertisers because it so infuriates me. I think you really need, and one of the things I think is really great about this conference and the evolution that we've been seeing with you folks is you are talking about other sources, other types of advertising, and other sources like crowdfunding, et cetera. I am working on a study of native advertising, sponsored content. And I went into that with sort of the typical journalists, how can this be any good? Skeptics. I'm getting more and more sold on it as a product that's worth looking at. I think that it has to be done really well, and I think it has to be particularly relevant to your particular audience. But I was telling somebody, I interviewed the guy for the study. I interviewed a guy from the New York Times the other day, and I asked him about what about public skepticism about native advertising. Do you get any pushback? And he said people don't object to native advertising. People object to bad advertising. And I think that's true. I think if you read something you think is a story and it turns out to be a promotion, then that's deceptive. But if you read something that's content, that's legitimate content, that happens to be sponsored by somebody who paid you, that can be very different. So I would really think about doing that. I talked to somebody here from Richland Source. I thought there was somebody here. I talked to Jay, was it? Yeah, at Richland Source, and they have very simple sponsored content, like it's the local. I think this was Richland, the local insurance. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, it's super simple. They basically pay on a per piece model. Some of them want to write it themselves. Others of them outsource it, but we haven't to date, I don't think, to my knowledge, we haven't generated the content for them. Personal opinion, I think we probably will have to do some coaching to bring some. It comes at us in varied forms, but like you said, yeah, we simplified the pricing structure. It's just flat, and it's we found success in doing it on a monthly basis. We have, I think, somewhere 3 or 4 clients doing it right now.
Yeah. So it could be something like the local insurance agent or banker who isn't directly selling their wares, but is talking about, here are some reasons you need homeowner insurance, not as a pitch, but as information that might be useful.
Ironically, the person I'm staying with while I'm here in town writes for The Guardian US, and she's working for their sponsored content arm, which is paying for all of the news content being done by The Guardian in the US. So what they're, it's really fucked up. But so what she's doing is they got $1.5 million, like for example, we were talking about this last night. They got $1.5 million from Ben & Jerry's to do 26 pieces on global warming. Ben & Jerry's just said, this is what we care about, go forth and do. And then embedded in the content is like Ben & Jerry's ads. She also has a foot in doing branded content. And she said, if you tell anybody at this conference anything, tell them to never do branded content because it sucks. Because what happens is, so branded content instead is when you say, here's the great thing about, Joe's Garage, and Joe's Garage is this way, and, da, 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 da. And then, like, the business owners get involved, and, she said they're hellish to work with, and they always want to, so what you really have to do is work out contracts where you basically say to, a business, you're a real estate broker, so, like, we'll do these topics. We promise we'll do a good job. Maybe you get like final editorial review when you do the sponsored content stuff, but we'll do it. But your name will be all over the page where it is.
Yeah, some of them do it that way, and some of them independently on an agreed-upon topic. Some of them collaborate with the brand or the company or whatever on the content.
So for Richland Source, you're more doing native advertising than sponsored content. It's about that business that they're posting on?
Is that content about the business?
Yeah.
No, actually.
Okay.
That's one thing we've done from the very beginning is it has to be topic and value add. Like it has to, like we really emphasize to our So one thing we've done from the very beginning is we've really emphasized to our advertisers, look, this won't get value for you if you don't give value to the reader. And for the most part, they've accepted that up front. Oh, okay. It's been a while since I've personally dealt with one. So one of the greatest examples was this pest control guy who wanted to write about pest control, and that didn't immediately strike me as people don't want to read about bugs necessarily, but let's go with this. And so he wrote this really flavorful like he inserted his personality into the narrative, and it actually wrote probably one of the best pieces of sponsored content about why roaches could be a problem, what you could do about it. And he didn't have to plug himself at all. It was just about Joe the pest guy talking about bugs and how they could be a problem. And I was really shocked. I didn't expect it to go that well. We have another approach. Another guy takes the approach of he really emphasizes, he's a financial planner, so he writes these really long, detailed things about why it's important to be proactive. And he writes one month he wrote specifically to women in financial planning, like, look, he's like, as a gender, they tend to be underserved. And he went through some specific ways women can leverage things. And so, yeah, those are two of the most obvious examples to me where they just talk about what they do every day and they act as experts. And audience members tend to value that and take it for what it is.
Yeah, one thing you have to, oh, go ahead.
One of the things that we just did is that we have real estate content. So what I thought of was, how do I add value to some of the companies that might be interested in leveraging towards that audience? So I actually got an asphalt paving company, and we just inserted their ad into that content, and that actually worked really well for them. And they had a very busy season, so apparently that worked. So. It was property transfers, foreclosures, new like wow house kind of stuff, and then we also had like real estate listings. So I have a real estate blogger, and she produces the content for free for us, and that's how I leveraged it. So that's one of the projects that I'm going to do when I get home, is kind of make a laundry list of other companies that would be benefit, like title companies and home remodeling companies that I think that would be leveraging some of that to that audience.
So I was curious, one of the things we've started to hear about and we're starting to look into is the idea of related interstitials in the content itself. So instead of large ads down the right banner, you're actually putting ads in the article itself, and it looks more like a Facebook stream. And I was just curious, and I think you actually mentioned something about that this morning too. You do interstitials in the middle of your articles? Yeah, so I was just curious if that's something that people are talking about generally as a new revenue source, or is it just viewed as a different way of doing ads?
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of that, and I went looking for it because I thought, okay, native, that's kind of native. I think, though, you're probably going to start seeing it more and more on mobile. I know the Times has this new product coming out that's been written about. It's called Mobile Moments. So it's like a day-parted thing, and sponsors can, to help you get through your day, and sponsors can sponsor that, and they're talking about putting what it would basically sounds like an ad in the stream. That's a lot less intrusive than a pop-up or a video that takes forever to load and then runs automatically, and you're get me out of here. I would say just a couple more things. One, on sponsored content, it's really important to think about what expectations you're setting for the advertiser. Most of the people I've talked to who have had a few years of experience with it now, they're not promising to drive clicks. It's just not a direct sales. It's more like brand awareness. Kind of like a lot of the advertising that that you have on your sites, or that I think Scott was talking about, where you just they want their name to register with you, or Eleanor was talking about when they need the product. They don't need it right now. So it's that kind of brand awareness idea. The one I just wanted to mention that was more getting people into the business type of advertising. I've just seen one instance of it. Brick City Live is doing something called Brick City Bucks, and it's basically kind of a almost membership program where you get a card, but then it's good for discounts with the local advertisers. And she did that as kind of an analog, with a print card to start out with, because she didn't want to spend a lot of money on mobile, and it worked out really well. So I think they're building a mobile app that will actually talk to you as you walk by the business, beep you or something. So, and then you all have talked about crowdfunding as another. There are a lot of other ideas out there, and the more you can experiment on a small scale, both in terms of effort and expense, and see what might resonate and what's worth going a step further, and then come back and share all that information. I think the better off the whole field is going to be. So that's what I've got.
We've got time for a couple of questions. We're running a little bit behind already, but we've got Michelle up here. We want to squeeze her brain a little bit.
Hi, Michelle. I'm Marcy Setlow from the Berkshire Edge. I'm on your list. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about what people are doing for membership and loyalty programs, because that's an area that I would like to explore further.
Well, the loyalty one is the one, the Brick City Bucks. Oh, sorry. loyalty program the one that I've seen is Brick City Bucks with the discounts and all that. Most of the membership, I mean, I would ask the group, most of the membership programs I've seen are on the nonprofit side. And, you know, they have the advantage over there of their membership can be a tax deductible donation. But I would like to see more thought given to that. I mean, I think that really depends on the community you're in and the profile of your site in that community. I could see, like, Wendy, tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, I think Berkeley is the kind of community where you could probably, tap into that, because people are really civically engaged. There's a level of affluence there that would lend itself to a membership program. I'm not sure about, a place, well, I don't want to talk about any place I don't really know about, but a lot of places you wouldn't see that happening if people didn't want that association. From what I know from the nonprofit side, I mean, these membership programs are very valuable revenue streams. They're not always big, but they're always coming in. It's like lots of little donations, recurring donations coming in. So it's a very stable stream. They're pretty labor intensive to build. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go out and get a bunch of members. So you'd want to consider that. But I think in the right community, with the right profile of the site, yeah, I think it could work.
I just wanted to make a comment about, what? Oh, I'm being ordered to stand up. I'm David Taylor, I'm from Salt Lake City, and my business partner and I, we come from this business side and the sales side of media. And one thing that we've experienced in the years of selling television advertising and selling digital advertising through various media sites is the trap that a lot of clients have initially tried to pigeon us into as far as clicks and tracking. And this kind of came up in a forum earlier. And a very illustrative, easy way to deflect some of that, because really it's not about the click, because it's about the impressions. It's about the branding, about the imagery, when you were playing off of this. People have been buying advertising for decades, eons. There's outdoor billboards all over the freeway. Where do I click on the billboard on the freeway? Where do I click on the television screen at home when I'm watching traditional television? No one ever has had the ability to click, but yet advertising has worked phenomenally well in a variety of different mediums that had nothing to do with clicks. And so it's about consistency and maintaining your message and your presence and being relevant and top of mind, and not, another thing is not trying to tell them every single service that you can provide them as a retailer, because that just muddles up your message. But a couple of things you do really well quality-wise in your service or your product. Anyway, that's just been weighing on my mind to say something about.
Thanks.
Did you want to say something?
Great points.
I think we've got time for maybe one more very quick question, if somebody has one. I'm sure you probably have long, involved questions that we don't have time for, but we can keep the conversation going. But get the mic over to Steve.
You know me too well.
I wasn't talking about you. I know you can come up with a quick question, too.
Okay, I'm going to try to do it tweet length. How many have non-advertising revenue sources?
How many have what?
Non-advertising revenue sources. How many of the ones in your study? Oh, well, that's good too.
Very few. Very few. I should say very few have a significant non-advertising. You see niche sites, depending on their size, can do event sponsorships. I'm thinking like technically. Event sponsorships work really well for them. They're starting to actually get more into advertising now. I'm trying to think of anybody else. that I mean, that's their primary source. It's very dominant, and that's why it's so challenging now, is because there aren't a lot of models out there for folks. I mean, the people in this room are going to have to. You're inventing the model, you know. So.
Thank you so much, and thanks for sparking such a great conversation. We are right now running a little bit behind, so we're going to abbreviate our coffee break here for a little bit. It'll be a 10-minute coffee break. But what we're going to do is after this, we'll have our breakout sessions, and they're going to take place in the 3 classrooms that are down this hall. And and I'm being motioned by Brian there. We have the poll posted in the conference blog, linepublishers.com/conference/blog, so you can vote on which idea from this morning's session is the winner and who's going to be buying the drinks at the bar this evening. And who's got the list of the breakout sessions handy? Thank you. What we have is a breakout session on crowdfunding, I believe. Yes, crowdfunding, a breakout session on membership, and a previous one. And yeah, management issues and self-care. I should know that because I'm going to be in on that one. Talking about a whole slew of issues about dealing with employees and how you can take care of yourself, take a vacation, try not to get PTSD from all the terrible crap that we do. So, pick your session, maybe pop back and forth in between those. And then after that will be another round of breakouts also over in those rooms. Thank you.